Okay, tonight we're going to talk about ownership chaining and schema owners and how they fit together and how you can see some really unexpected results in your security model when you go to assign views and whatnot. And unfortunately, this isn't this isn't a small topic. I mean, it can be boiled down to a couple simple rules. But, in practice, it can really bite you sometimes if you're not careful of what you're doing. So, what I'm going to do here is I'll come up with a couple things here on the spot, and we'll see what we can get. Okay? So, what we'll do, let's see, I've got these tables right here that have been created already. I got the people table, so we'll just say right here, select top 10 star from DBO people, and I'm in a DBO in this database, so I should have no trouble at all doing that. Now we've got this VW, Sean's VW test user, and I'm logged in with this other window under that user, and let's see if we can do the same thing. Select top 10 star from dot people. Oops. Dot people. Okay, so this guy doesn't have permissions to this table. So user number 2 here, Sean VW test, doesn't have rights to the DBO people table. Now, of course, I can give him rights, right? So I can say select on people to oops. Select on DBO people. To Sean view test. What did I? Oh, Sean's view test. There we go. Sean's view test. That's better. Okay. So now this guy should be able to do it just fine. There we go. So he's got rights. Now I'll deny this. Deny. Oops. There we go. So he is denied, and he can't access it anymore. Right. Now, let's say if I say create view VW people, and just so that we keep things straight, I'll say DBO, right? As stop that. Get over here. Select star from DBO people. So now if I say select star from VW people, right, and I'll just, and I'm doing select top 10 because I got a lot of data in there and I don't feel like waiting for it to select all of that. So if I do this, he doesn't have permissions because I haven't given it to him yet, right? So now if I say, actually, let me come up here and just do it this way. Grant select on VW. There we go. Now if I come back here, this guy can see VW people, even though he's still officially denied rights on the base level table. That's called ownership chaining. And what that says is, because I personally own both of these objects, I own people and I own VW people, that if I give somebody rights to this view that contains this table in it, that my implicit instructions are, or my intent is clear. My intent is to give them access to this data from this view. So, and it's not that, it's a separate security check. When an object is owned, when two objects are owned by the same person like this, and there's a chain there where you've been given rights to this object, but you haven't been given rights to this object, it implies that you want them to have those rights to that base level object, and so it just doesn't check the data at all. It doesn't check the security at all. Okay, sorry about that. I got a work call. I'm not really entirely sure where I was. I think I just finished talking about ownership chaining and explaining that the fact that oh, I think that's what I was doing. So yeah, when I select from this view, the fact that I own this table inside the view makes SQL bypass the permission check altogether. So it's not that it changes your permissions, it's that it doesn't even check them because it knows they've got the same owner. So, okay, that's the basics of permissions of ownership chaining, right? And how that affects permissions. Now, that's if they're the same owner, right? So what happens if I have a table in another schema that's created by a different user? Will I still see the same results? So I come over here to you see my view master user here, and I'll create a table in I'll create one in DBO, and I'll say view master table, and so it doesn't really have to be a complicated table, right? We can just create that. Okay, good. So I've got this, and if I go to try to do that from this user, select star from right there, and of course he can't see it because I haven't given him permissions to it yet, right? So if I give him permissions to it, grant select on DBO. Actually, I think I can get away with that here too. There we go. I'll do that. Now this guy, and this is still Sean's view test, right? Now he can see the table, right? There's no data in it, but he can see the table. So that part of it works. Now, what if I deny this? If I deny select on that table, and come back to this guy, he of course can't see it, right? So now let me see. Since this guy owns the table, I don't want him to create the view, because if he does create the view, then he'll this guy will be able to still see the base level table. So I'm going to have this guy create the view. This is me. This is actually my account. So now I'm going to say create view as ECT from view master table. There we go. Well, if I do that, there we go. If I come here and say VW, and this guy gets denied because he still hasn't been given rights to the view. Now, I'd like to point out still that this guy, let me double up on this here, that this guy still has deny, oops, he still has deny on that table. Well, stop with the J already. There we go. So he still has deny on that table. Remember here where we denied to that table. So now I'm going to say, I'm going to grant select on that view to him, right? Good. So now he's been granted rights to the view, but not to the underlying object. And remember, it was the ViewMaster account that created the table, right? And it was my account, me, who created the view. So these guys officially have two different owners. So if you go by the fact that ownership chaining doesn't check the ownership unless the objects are owned by the same user, then after I do this, see, this fails, then this should fail too, because he doesn't have rights to that. He's been denied rights to the base table, right? But look, he has query rights to this table. That returned. It didn't give me an error. So now you have to ask yourself, why did this not work? Why is ownership chaining still being enforced? Okay, sorry about that. Another call. Busy ETL night, I guess. Okay, so what we're seeing here is two different people created objects, ViewMaster and me, and this guy shouldn't be able to access them, even though, and I'll show you something else too. I mean, even though they were created by two separate people, and mind you, they're both in the same schema, right? So let's look at this. Let's create. Let's see. There's a view test schema, and we'll say, just to keep it completely separate. So okay, so ViewMaster created a table in view test, right, called my table. So let's see if we can see from dot my table, right? Come here, and of course you can't see it because that is right. View test my table. Oh, well, for one thing, I'll do that. And it's a view test, not view master. Yeah, I'll pull it out one of these days, guys. So, okay, so permission was denied. And why is that? Because we haven't given him rights yet, right? So now we'll grant select on test.myTable. There we go. And so now this guy can see the table just fine, right? Okay, no surprises there. So what do we need to do here? We need to force a situation where this guy doesn't have rights to the table, the underlying table, and therefore doesn't have rights to the view either. So far, ownership chaining has been stepping in at every step, because, there was the same owners, or there were different owners in the same schema, which is kind of the same thing. So now what we're going to do, so I've created this table right here, my table, in view test, which is a completely different schema, and I'm going to have a different view created. So I'm going to create dbo vw dot my table, and I'm going to do a select star from view test dot my table. So I'm going to create that view. Oh, duh. Huh. There we go. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, so I've got a table in the view test schema, and I'm and I just created a view in the DBO schema, right, that points to the view test table, the view test schema table, right? So we've got two separate users in a schema that isn't owned by either one of them, right? That neither one of them have ownership to, and this guy has, and I've created a view in one schema that points to the object in another schema. So if I come back to the user, let's say dbo dot view. Of course, he's denied because I haven't given him permissions on the view yet, right? So I'm going to give him permissions to the view. View test. There we go. Oops. Oh, that's because that's DBO. There we go. Okay, so now I've given him rights to that view, and he can see it just fine. But he also still has rights to that table, right? So now let's deny rights on that table, since we've got two separate objects and two separate schemas created by two separate users. Then ownership chaining shouldn't kick in, and we should be fine. So I'm going to say, I'm going to deny access to the base level table. So view test. So I'm denying select on the base table. There we go. So now he doesn't have rights to the base table, but does he still have rights to the view? Yes, he still has rights to the view. So even when we have two separate objects created by two separate users in two separate schemas, we still have ownership chaining going on. How is that possible? And I'll tell you how that's possible, because remember, ownership chaining goes for it matters, blah, blah, blah. What am I trying to say? Ownership chaining kicks in effect when the objects are owned by the same user. I'm an SA on this server. Okay, this is me. I'm the one creating all of this stuff, assigning permissions and whatnot. So I am an SA, and in every database, SAs are automatically mapped to DBO. Everything I do, my default schema is DBO. So I'm doing work as DBO in this database. This user isn't DBO, okay? I think I gave him, this is ViewMaster, right? I think I gave him read and write and DDL admin. So he's not a DBO by default, okay? But since I'm doing work as DBO, then anything I create is going to be owned by DBO. I can't actually own objects, okay? And if you look in here, we all know that the DBO schema, I come here, is owned by DBO. And view test, look at that. Since I created view test is owned by DBO as well. So these objects, even though they're in different schemas, actually do have the same owners, right? So let's do this. Let's see here. Let me show you a side by side here again, right? Just in case something goes awry here. Who am I? That's me, and so that's ViewMaster. And so I want to, let me get rid of Explorer details. There we go. So there's ViewMaster and there's Sean's view test. Okay, so right now I don't have rights. This guy right here doesn't have rights to the table, but he does have rights to the table through the view, even though it's in a different schema, right? And that's because it's owned by DBO. If I switch the schema owner to ViewMaster, now these guys don't have the same owner anymore. The view that's in DBO and the table that's in view test down here don't have the same owner anymore. So if you look here, the table and view test still can't be queried, right? Because it doesn't have rights. And this view doesn't have rights anymore either because ownership chaining doesn't take effect, okay? And if you look here, it's telling you exactly what it is. It says that permission was denied on my table. That's the base table in the view test schema. So it's denying permission on the base table because that's what it should do, because these now have different owners. So this can be really tricky because this can jump up and bite you in places that you never thought it could. So I wanted to show you guys some of this because there's no such thing as a security view. You can't create a view that somebody can select from where they don't have permissions to the base level table. Okay, that remains a firm construct in SQL security and in a lot of databases actually, right? But ownership chaining can allow that kind of scenario to come in, and it's not necessarily by design, I don't think. They didn't give us a way to turn off ownership chaining. You can turn off cross-database ownership chaining, which is, the exact same thing that I demonstrated here, just across from one database to the other. But you can't turn off database chaining in the current database, and I wish they would let us, right? Because that would complete the security model. But, so what you need to do, depending on what you need to do, you either need to make sure that all of your schemas are owned by DBO, or you need to make sure that none of your schemas are owned by DBO, right? Or mix and match whichever ones. But it's understanding this kind of thing that's going to allow you to put in the security that you want, that you need to put in, and just be aware of these pitfalls, because this isn't necessarily easy, and you run into this stuff all the time where you think that you're doing one thing but you're really doing another. So anyway, that's ownership chaining and how schema ownership comes into play, and how the objects really aren't owned by who you think they're owned by. And that's all I have on that. Good luck.